Okay, happy Wednesday, freshmen. Today we are going to talk about rhythm as an element of sound when it comes specifically to poetry. So rhythm is basically just the poet's use of syllables, whether they are stressed or unstressed, and kind of the beat and the pattern that they create within the poem to give it a meter or to give it a rhythm. So rhythm has a lot to do with syllable movement. When it comes to sound, so syllables, remember, are the different types of stressed and unstressed vowel sounds that you hear when you say words. So that's something that you probably learned when you were younger, but just a reminder, it's kind of has to do with the vowels and consonant patterns and how we pronounce or emphasize different letters over other letters to give that word its sound. So for example, in the word banana, we stress the vowels, we stress the A's. So it has 3 syllables, banana. You can count those out. You should all be familiar with syllables. That's something that you should have learned, like I said, when you were younger. But I want you to kind of call that forward and think about syllable usage as we talk about rhythm when it comes to poetry, because that's a huge element in sound. And the authors usually use different kinds of rhythms to help create the tone and help create the mood. Same with rhyme schemes. Same with kind of everything else that we've talked about when it comes to different elements of poetry. There are so many different things that poets use to primarily not just write the words down on paper, not just syntax and diction, but they also use elements of sound to kind of create a tone and an attitude that is really present based on whether or not the poem is more upbeat, or maybe it's more slower, or maybe the opposite syllable for what you would expect is stressed rather than unstressed. And so kind of it gives it a little bit more emphasis on certain words, and that all helps to create to a different tone. Okay? So that's basically what rhythm is just the kind of emphasis that is put on different sounds so that when you are reading through a line of a poem, you hear certain things and it sounds like a certain rhythm is being followed or a certain meter is being followed, and whether that's more upbeat or more slow or more stressed, different things like that help create the tone and help reinforce the mood that the author is trying to generate. So think back to the poem that we read last week by Robert Frost, Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Day. One specific line, 2 lines actually from that poem are, he gives his harness bells a shake to ask if there is some mistake. So this is something that we talked about a little bit last week, this exact same set of lines, but I want to talk today about the rhythm that Frost uses because it's really, really clear in this poem. And if you look at the slide, I have bolded the stressed syllables to show you what I mean by that. But he gives his harness bells a shake to ask if there is some mistake. So every other syllable is stressed. And to do that, he creates kind of that sing-songy, upbeat meter that the whole poem follows. So it follows that rhythm, and that kind of lull gets you sort of sucked in and helps create further that more comforting, slow, gentle kind of setting that Frost is trying to establish. So he not only establishes that through his word choice, through his diction and syntax, but also through the sound that he uses, through the consistent use of rhyme, end rhyme we see here, shake and mistake, but also through the use of rhythm because he has that constant meter pattern going throughout, and it doesn't break, which kind of gets us into a lull. One common thing that you'll see poets do is actually break that syllable pattern, because whenever we see that pattern break, similar to whenever we see a rhyme scheme break, it draws our attention to that line. It makes it really clear where our emphasis and our focus should be while reading through that specific poem. So these are the ways that without sound, poetry doesn't have as much meaning, because these elements of sound like rhyme and rhythm help give us that really clear understanding of where the emphasis should be, how we should be reading the words, whether it creates a certain rhythm and a certain mood, a certain tone because of the rhyming and the rhythm patterns, or maybe it breaks those patterns and we are able to understand which words deserve our attention. We're able to be kind of snapped out of a trance that maybe we're put in through the syllable usage, stuff like that. It just helps create that kind of tone. So obviously when you have this upbeat meter that we see in Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening, it's very clear that it's a lot more upbeat, a lot more gentle, a lot more calm. It's a happy sort of poem. It's not supposed to be dark. It's not supposed to be dreary. If you were to read The Raven, it's a lot more dark because a lot of the stressed syllables are kind of harsher sounds and it doesn't follow that consistent meter. So that's how Poe kind of uses rhythm to help reinforce the dark tone that he has in that poem. And so hopefully you can use kind of this idea when you are reading through Emily Dickinson's poem, Because I Could Not Stop for Death, to kind of understand the rhyme and rhythm scheme that she uses. So hers alternates between lines. When you have the question in the worksheet that asks about the rhythm scheme, basically you're just counting the number of syllables. So in he gives his harness bells a shake, you have he gives his harness bells a shake. You have 8. Okay, that's iambic pentameter is what that's called. It's a very specific meter that we see often in poetry, is those 8 syllables, one after the other, ending on a downbeat or ending on a stressed syllable. Shake is more stressed. and then the next line to ask if there is some mistake. Again, you have 8 ending on a stressed syllable or one that you give more emphasis to, and that just continues to follow that iambic pentameter or that meter that is established using 8 syllables. Dickinson uses an 8/16 syllable rhythm scheme when she's writing, so one line will have 8 stressed syllables, and the next one will have more than that. So that's something that you'll need to count out for yourself and understand through just simply counting her syllables. I think it's 8/16. I don't remember off the top of my head. I'd have to look at the poem again. But she doesn't just use 8/8/8/8. She changes it in between, which kind of helps give it that longer sound, that longer feeling on the next line, which helps make it feel more drawn out, and you feel the poem slowing down, which is something that she does in the poem. So she kind of creates that attitude with the rhythm that is established there. So that's just a little bit about rhythm. If you have any more questions about that, let me know. But when we're talking about a rhythm pattern or a rhythm scheme, that's just the meter. Different numbers of stressed syllables become different kinds of meters. So when you have 8 in a line, that's called iambic pentameter. That's not something we're going to spend a lot of time learning today. You don't have to spend time memorizing that. You'll get to that in the next couple of years. What you need to understand is how to be able to count syllables in a specific line, how to be able to understand when you have the upbeat and the downbeat. Just think back to when you were little and you would clap out sounds. That's what you're doing here basically. But I want you to be thinking about, as you count out the rhythm, as you count out the number of syllables and determine the rhythm scheme, why the author might be doing that. Does that make it more upbeat? Does that make it more drawn out? Does it create a happy tone or attitude, or a sad tone or attitude, or maybe an angry or rushed one if they have less than 8? Use your understanding of meter and rhythm to help further understand the poem, because poets do not just use word choice. They don't just use diction and syntax. That's part of it. Style is a really big part of poetry, but sound also plays just as much of a role when it comes to determining the rhyme scheme and the rhythm pattern that they want to use to help create that mood and that tone and that attitude that really sets the poem up for us to understand it better. Again, a really easy way to think about this is to think of songs and kind of the beats that songs follow. Are they quicker? Are they slower? Do you have longer drawn out lines? Are they pretty short and choppy? Different things like that help us understand if it's a sad song or a happy song, stuff like that. The same goes for poetry. So yeah, that's rhythm in a nutshell. Obviously, if you have any questions, you can shoot me an email if something on the slide doesn't make sense or if something that I've said doesn't make sense, just let me know. Otherwise, that should be enough information for you to have the basic understanding of rhythm as it relates to sound as an element of poetry. So yeah, happy Wednesday, and I look forward to hopefully seeing some of you guys tomorrow. Bye.